If you have a 2014 F-150 with dual AC climate control and your driver's side happens to not work no more, well, this is what you have to do in order to replace this actuator. Yes, I'm not kidding. You have to remove this whole dash out of the vehicle, and then you got to remove the whole heater core box. And then to remove this piece that sits on the bottom of the heater core box, just to replace this little actuator. This actuator is what controls your doors for your heat for the driver's side and your AC for the driver's side. So if your driver's side is stuck on hot and you turn it cold and it still blows hot, or vice versa, then it's because of this actuator. There's no easy access to get to this actuator. It's at the very bottom and there's no room to actually remove it besides removing everything else. So I'm just going to do a little walkthrough on how to even get this far, removing all the bolts, connectors, and what the process is in removing the whole dash from a vehicle to replace one of these. Of course, this follows in line if you're replacing your heater core, your evaporator, or just replacing your whole heater box. It's all the same process, but I'm just replacing this small little actuator. And let me pop this in real quick. The first step is to slide the seat all the way forward. Now that you got your seat all the way forward, there's going to be a 8mm bolt that's going to be on the back side of the center console. Once you've taken that out, it's the same process for the other side. Now that we got those two bolts out from the rear of the center console, let's go ahead and slide both our passenger side and driver seats all the way back. And we're going to remove this finishing panel on the front of the console. You're just going to give it a pull out towards you, and it should come right out. Let's do the same thing on the other side. Once you have both sides of these finishing panels removed, then you can remove the 8mm bolt that is in the front side of the center console, and then there's another bolt on the other side of the vehicle. So before we move our center console out the way to remove our dash, we're going to have to remove this finishing part on top of the center console. So this whole piece is in one assembly, and it should just pop right out. Just like that. So now once we got our finishing panel out, to remove the shifter, there's going to be 4 8mm bolts holding this thing in. So let's go ahead and remove those. Okay, to remove the shift cable from the shifter, there's going to be a little piece right there is what you have to knock off the shifter to disconnect the cable from the shifter. What I like to do is get a little tool like this that has an opening. So my tool is right in the center of the shifter, as close as the head as possible, and then I give my screwdriver a nice jerk. So support it with my forearm, and then it disengages from the shifter. The next part in removing the shift cable is to release this little locking tab. And what you do is get a little flathead, and you just push on this and lift up. And the shifter is out. A little bit of a close-up on this clip is this part is slide in. All you gotta do is push this clip in, and then this whole piece slides up. So now to continue working on the front of the console, you got 2 8mm screws holding this in. And I'm just going to grab behind here and lift up and pull towards me. And this whole center console should slide back. And now you got some harnesses on this side, so let me go show you how to remove that. Okay, now you got this whole harness junction right here that connects to all of your systems on the center console. What you just have to do is release this charging cable right here, big connector. You push this in, and then this should slide right out. And now your whole center console is disconnected from your dash. Make sure to guide your shift cable out of the way. We got our center console out and out of the way. Let's go ahead and start working on the left side of the instrument panel. So what I like to do is work on the A-pillar and then work on this side, removing the panels and removing the weather strip, and then we can work on the actual underneath part of the instrument panel. Is pull this up with, we'll set this right underneath the vehicle, pull this weather stripping, move it towards the back, and now we could get in here with our pry tool, pop that, set that to the side. Oh, there's a spider. Hello, guy. Well, this is not my car. Well, I'm pretty sure they didn't want a spider in their car anyway. I was trying to save it, but there's another bug. That is gross. Okay, now that we got this piece off, this bottom piece off, let's go ahead and remove our kick panel. So you got to pull this towards you, and it should be releasing, and then you just guide it off of the hood latch handle. Like that. So once you got all that torn apart and that kick panel removed, now you want to come on the underside and disconnect these three connectors right here, which I already disconnected. I guess to make this a little easier, you could remove these two or just one, this hood latch thing, and then you could take this connector off. So once you have your connectors disconnected from right there, we can work on disconnecting the e-brake. I already disconnected it, but all you gotta do is pull on that wire and guide it to that little slat right there, and then it should just slide right out. Pretty easy to disengage. And then our next step on this side is to disconnect our steering shaft from the steering wheel. So I like to do is mark it just in case it's not. I like to mark the steering shaft just in case that it's spline, so I make it go in the right spot when I put it back together. But I believe this one is like it has a one direction way it goes on, but just in case, I'll mark it, and then we could take this bolt out for the steering shaft. Okay, once you got that bolt out, I should have said this before taking the bolts out, is to make sure your wheels are straight and your steering wheel straight. So when you put everything back together, you have like a reference point to know that you put it on correctly. But I already have my wheel straight, the steering wheel straight, and I marked it. Now we could just wiggle this thing off, and it's not spline, so it only goes on one way. So we'll place this bolt back in here so we don't lose it, and we'll move on to the next step. So now we got everything done. mostly on the bottom side of the left side. Let's go ahead and remove this A-pillar trim piece. All we gotta do is pull this way and slide upward, and make sure you disconnect. Oh yes, make sure you disconnect your speaker harness right here, and this piece should come right off. Moving on to the passenger side, let's go ahead and work on our glove box. So you got 1, 2, 3 screws holding this glove box on. So let's remove those first before we lower our glove box. Now we got those 3 screws removed. Let's go ahead and open our glove box, and it should come right out. Let me grab this, and let's remove our bottom trim piece. Set this underneath, put that back in there, and then we can remove our weather stripping, just so you know, to set it out of our way. Put this back here, and then now let's pull this towards us, and then this other bottom piece should come out as well. And that down in there, and then now we have access to all the harness. Pop these bad boys out, and I believe these are, they look like 7, so we got 2 little screws out. Put those right there. And now with the same thing, we just pull outward and up, and this should come off. Place these screws right here, and we'll set this to the side. So now let's go ahead and remove all of our harnesses, which we're going to have to remove this green one, this gray one, this blue one, and this gray one. I disconnected all of these, just make it easier one-handed. Then you go underneath here, you disconnect your blower motor, and then your blower motor resistor, and then you can disconnect all the connectors on the BCM, and you disconnect this gray connector. I thought I disconnected, but disconnect that one, and you should be mostly good on this side. You probably have to disconnect this antenna wire, and I think that is it for the passenger side. So before we start messing with the brackets on the center part of the instrument cluster, we're going to have to remove this, I think it's an amp, and then we got to remove this bracket that's connected to the instrument cluster. So there's 1, 2, 3 of these bolts holding this, I think it's an amp, and then we'll set this to the side. 1, 2, 4, and this bracket should come right out. We'll set this back here. So on this passenger side, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 of these bolts. That is a bracket holding this instrument, and this bracket should come right out. There's actually a harness clip to it, and we'll set these bolts to the side. Okay, so I ended up pulling most of the carpet out from the front. You just kind of fold it and then kind of tuck it out from underneath the center of the instrument panel, and then I don't know why, but all car manufacturers has one wire that runs under everything that goes to the RCM, which that means you gotta take the seats out, you gotta remove this bottom air duct. But I don't do it that way. I kind of just disconnect it from here and I feed the whole harness. Okay, we're just going to be pulling this harness. That won't fit underneath this air duct that goes to the rear, but having it right here gives me a lot more slack just to flop it over. So let's go ahead and move to the other side, remove the same bracket, and then we'll move forward. Okay, now it's time for removing the support bolts to the actual instrument panel. So there's going to be two 13s on the side, on the passenger side. Then there's going to be one bolt here, which is covered with a little panel on top of the instrument panel. I removed this one on the driver's side, and then there's two bolts on the top side of the instrument panel, one in the corner, and three on the driver's side door. So I already loosened these two. Let me show you real quick on how to remove this little panel on top. All I'm taking is a little pick, and I'm just going slowly around, lifting up on it just to remove it, and it should come out just like that. So we go on the outside. That bolt right there, you have to get that with the 13 mil with probably with the magnet and an extension, and loosen that, and then I'll go ahead and go to that side to show you. Moving on to the driver's side, we got 1, 2, 3 bolts on the driver's side, and then there's one hidden. It's kind of hard to see, but my light's pointing on it. That's the bolt in the very corner to the left that you have to remove. I have an extension. Get off. I have an extension with a double wobble with a deep 13 magnet to loosen this top corner, and then of course you got two more right there. That's holding the instrument panel in, and then once you've removed these 6 and then the other 3 on the passenger side, and then this whole thing should be loosened up to slide forward. So let me go ahead and remove all these bolts. A little tip in removing these hidden bolts behind the dash on top is to grab a light and to use a reflection of the light as a mirror, and then you could guide your socket onto the bolt, so you don't gotta guess and like wiggle it around and hope you're on it. But you just shine your light, and then it creates like a reflection, and then you use a reflection from the light to guide your socket onto the bolt. So once you got all your bolts loose and everything, and your top bolts taken out, this whole thing should be loose like that. You're probably going to need a second person to help you out to carry it both sides, and I like to set it on the front seats. I don't really like taking it all the way out just to get access to the heater box. So let me go find someone and take this out. And look at that, the dash is out. So I got a helping hand to help me lift it out, but I did forget a couple of things that I would like to show you that I forgot. This cable that runs all the way to the radio. So I didn't take the radio out, and so I didn't disconnect this, but you don't have to. All you have to do is plug it right there where this yellow one is. So this was stuck, and that was not letting the panel go forward, but I didn't know it disconnected from right there. But I'll plug this in back, and this one back in, and that was the only thing that I forgot on this side, and I forgot 2 more other things on this side, so let me go show you that. So on the driver's side, when we were pulling the dash out, I forgot to disconnect this cabin temperature hose that connects right here. It is a little simple clip that disconnects and then goes to the dash. So make sure you disconnect that if you have this in your truck or vehicle. And then, simple mistake, I forgot to fully disconnect my cable, my e-brake cable, from the actual handle. That's right here. So just push on these 2 little clips right here, and then it should be released. But everything else went pretty smoothly. I had enough slack on my RCM harness to set the instrument panel on the seats. Now I got full access to the heater core box. Coming to the outside, you're gonna have the fastener right there holding the heater box. You got a fastener down there, and then you got a fastener up here. And then of course you gotta do an evac on your AC system and just connect your expansion valve, and then disconnect your quick disconnect for your heater core hoses, and then the whole heater box should just come out. Now some of these might have this floor vents that's connected at the very bottom of the heater box. These floor vents that connect to the bottom of the heater box, you might have them, you might have them, you might not have them. In this case, this vehicle does have it. In order to remove these, you gotta remove the full carpet, remove the seats, and of course I didn't remove any of that. That plastic is pretty malleable. Just take your time with it, and then all I did was pull it back, lift it above where it connected to the heater box, move the heater box kind of back, and then tuck underneath that the floor vents underneath the heater box. So that gave me enough access to move this around and replace the actuator that I need to replace. So okay, we got our heater box positioned in a way where we can remove this bottom piece that connects to our floor vents for our heating and air conditioning system. There's just 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, and 4, holding this in, and this should just plop right out. Set that on top, and now we have access to our blend door actuator, which these are just 8mm bolts. Take our connector out, and this should come right out. This is our point of failure and why our driver's side AC was not working. We got our new actuator in here. This is our old actuator. We could just toss this out and install our new one. I usually like to do these by hand because I don't want to get this far and snap an ear or ruin the heater box. So I usually just always go in by hand with these screws. Now we installed our new unit for the driver's side temperature blend door actuator. Now it's time to put all this back together. So let's get to it. And we are done. I got everything nice and clean and everything where it should be. I wiped down everything, you know, get my fingerprints off, clean up all the dust and dirt, make sure everything looks nice while I'm putting everything back together. I don't want to return the customer's vehicle all dirty. So I cleaned it to my best of my ability with what I had. I made sure the temperature blend door actuator on the driver's side is working properly and the customer's concern is fixed. It's switching nicely between cold and hot, and it's dual, so it's working, everything's working good. Overall, this is what it takes to remove the dash, remove the heater core box, and replace the actuator. Also, if you're replacing the evaporator or the heater core, it's the same process. I just hope this walkthrough removing the dash was helpful. Anyway, this will be it for this video.